He wakes up to silence. No argument. No alarm clock. No rush. Just the sound of the coffee maker and the morning light touching the edge of the table. For the first time in years, he feels peace. Not excitement. Not pleasure. Just peace. For most of his life, he believed that a man's value was measured by who stood beside him, that his purpose was to provide, protect, and please. That happiness came from being needed. He did everything right. He worked hard. He built a life. He built a marriage. He built an image. And one day, it all came crashing down. She left. Or maybe he did. It doesn't matter anymore. Because what remained was silence. And in that silence, he met someone he had ignored for decades. Himself. At first, the silence felt like punishment. It was loud. It echoed with memories and questions that had no answers. He wondered if he had failed. If being alone meant being broken. If this quiet life was proof that he had lost. But over time, something changed. He began to hear more than just his thoughts. He began to feel the rhythm of life again. The sound of rain. The weight of his breath. The calm that comes when there is no one left to impress. That's when he realized something powerful. He wasn't lonely. He was free. Freedom doesn't always come with applause. Sometimes it comes disguised as emptiness. But beneath that emptiness is space. Space to think. Space to breathe. Space to rebuild. He used to live in reaction to someone else's moods, needs, and expectations. Now, every decision was his. Every quiet morning was his. Every moment of peace belonged to him. People around him started to ask questions. Are you seeing anyone? Don't you get lonely? When will you settle down again? He smiled and said, I already have. I settled down with myself. That answer confused them, but it made perfect sense to him, because for the first time in his adult life, he wasn't performing. He wasn't chasing validation. He wasn't trying to prove that he was enough. He simply was. It's funny how society teaches men that without a woman, they are incomplete. Movies, songs, friends, even family all say the same thing. Find her, keep her, build around her, then you'll be whole. But here's the truth. If your peace depends on someone else's presence, it's not peace, it's permission. Being alone taught him that peace is not something you're given. It's something you create. It's not found in company. It's found in clarity. And clarity came quietly. In the morning coffee, in long walks without conversation, in late nights with books instead of arguments, he began to enjoy his own company. He realized he didn't need constant noise to feel alive. He didn't need validation to feel valuable. The silence that once scared him became his teacher. It showed him who he really was. Not the husband, not the provider, not the man others expected him to be. Just himself. That's where thriving begins. Not when you have everything, but when you stop needing everything. He started to notice the small victories, waking up without tension, eating what he wanted, working out because he enjoyed it, not because he needed approval, choosing stillness over chaos. He didn't post about it. He didn't announce it. He just lived it. And the more he lived it, the stronger he became. Not in the way that shows up in a mirror, but in the way that shows up in your spirit. Strength, he learned, isn't about endurance. It's about acceptance. It's about knowing what you can't control and finding peace anyway. He stopped running from silence. He started walking with it. Most men fear being alone because they've never truly met themselves. But when you finally do, you realize that solitude isn't empty. It's full of truth. He used to think he was losing something when he lost her. Now he knows he was gaining something greater. Perspective. The world tells you that love completes you, but the truth is, it can only meet you where you are complete already. When he learned to stand alone, he didn't stop loving. He just stopped begging for love to define him. Solitude didn't make him cold. It made him clear, and clarity gave him power. The kind of power that can't be taken away. The power of knowing that peace doesn't come from people. It comes from presence. He doesn't hate women. He doesn't hate love. He simply understands it now. He knows that real love can't exist without freedom, and freedom begins within. When the noise faded, he started rebuilding. Not the house, not the marriage, himself. At first, he didn't even know where to begin. He had spent decades being a provider, a protector, a planner. Every hour of his life had revolved around someone else's needs. Now there was only him, and that scared him. Because men are taught to lead others, not themselves. But slowly, he learned. He began with small things. He cleaned his kitchen. He cooked for one. He folded his own laundry, not because he had to, but because he wanted order. He found comfort in the structure of simple routines. Mornings became sacred. He'd wake before sunrise, stretch, make coffee, and watch the sky turn gold. There was no one to rush him, no one to ask questions, only the quiet sound of life unfolding. He started going to the gym again, not to look younger, not to prove anything. He went because discipline gave him purpose. It reminded him that strength doesn't come from attention. It comes from consistency. Every rep, every mile, every drop of sweat became a conversation with himself. He wasn't fighting his past anymore. He was refining his future. And that's the difference. Men who thrive alone don't run away from life. They return to it with focus. He realized solitude wasn't isolation. It was space. The space to listen, the space to think clearly, the space to rebuild without interruption. There's a kind of peace that only shows up when no one is watching. That quiet satisfaction of a day lived honestly, of progress no one applauds, of effort that doesn't need to be seen to matter. He began journaling, not the kind filled with goals and to-do lists, but the kind that asks better questions. What do I really want? What do I believe in? What kind of man am I when no one else is around? The answers didn't come quickly, but they came, and they were real. He realized how much of his life had been performance. The smiles, the dinners, the long explanations just to keep peace that wasn't peace. When you stop performing, you start becoming. Solitude stripped away the false layers, the fear of being judged, the need to impress, the desire to fit into someone else's story. And beneath it all, he found something priceless. Clarity. Clarity about what actually matters. It's not the car, not the house, not even success. It's alignment. When your thoughts, words, and actions all move in the same direction. That's freedom. He used to chase peace through others, through approval, through relationships that made him feel needed. Now, he chased peace through truth. He began to see women differently, not as validation, not as distraction, but as reflection. He no longer needed a partner to complete him. He needed one who could walk beside him. And if that didn't happen, he'd still be fine. Because a man who knows his worth alone becomes untouchable, not arrogant, not closed off, just steady. There's a certain power in stillness that loud men never understand. It's the kind of power that comes when you no longer need to prove you have it. He learned that solitude doesn't mean doing nothing. It means doing things that mean something. Reading books that feed the mind. Lifting weights that build resilience. Walking miles that clear the mind. Writing words that remind you of who you are. No one sees the work. No one claps for it. But it changes everything. Because discipline is love in motion. It's how you tell yourself, I still care about me. In the beginning, people thought he was running away from life. But in truth, he was running toward it. He was learning how to live without permission. Men who thrive in solitude don't avoid love. They just refuse to lose themselves in it again. They understand that peace isn't found in company. It's found in control. Control of your mind, your time, your emotions. He used to think freedom meant doing whatever he wanted. Now he knows freedom means not being owned by what he wants. That realization changed everything. It turned his quiet mornings into a sanctuary, his simple meals into meditation, his workouts into worship. He stopped chasing excitement and started chasing peace. He discovered that peace isn't boring. It's powerful, When you no longer need to escape your life, that's when you've built the right one. The longer he stayed in solitude, the more he began to understand something deeper. Loneliness is not the absence of people, it's the absence of purpose. And once you find purpose, you're never alone again. He didn't become emotionless. He became centered. He didn't stop caring. He just stopped bleeding for things that didn't deserve his energy. There's a line he wrote in his journal one night. It said, "The world doesn't need more busy men. It needs more calm ones," and that became his truth. He was no longer interested in being impressive. He wanted to be peaceful, because peace lasts longer than attention. That's what thriving really means. Not louder, not richer, not surrounded, just balanced. Every man must face that choice sooner or later, to keep running after what the world says he should want, or to stop, breathe, and rebuild what he actually needs. He chose the second path, the quiet one, the steady one, the one that no one notices at first, until they see the glow in his eyes and realize he's not lonely, he's grounded. There's a moment when solitude stops feeling heavy, when it no longer feels like something you have to survive. It becomes something you protect. That moment doesn't come all at once. It creeps in slowly, like the morning light through half-closed blinds. And when it does, you realize you're no longer waiting for anyone to save you. He felt it one afternoon, sitting on his porch with a cup of coffee in his hands. The world was quiet. No phone buzzing. No arguments waiting to happen. Just a soft wind moving through the trees. For years, that kind of quiet would have scared him. Now it felt sacred. It felt like peace had finally learned his name. That's when it hit him. Solitude doesn't weaken a man. It strengthens him. It takes away the noise, the distraction, the pretending. It gives you the chance to meet yourself again, to look in the mirror and finally recognize the man staring back. Because most men spend their lives performing, trying to prove they're enough. Enough for their job, enough for their family, enough for society's idea of success. But thriving men aren't performers. They're present. When you stop needing to impress, you start to evolve. You become lighter. You move slower but see clearer. You stop chasing and start choosing. That's the quiet power of solitude. It turns need into choice, and choice into peace. He used to think he was defined by his relationships. Now he knows he's defined by his alignment. When your actions match your values, you no longer need approval. He stopped searching for the next relationship, not because he gave up on love, but because he stopped mistaking attachment for connection. There's a big difference between needing someone and choosing someone. Need comes from fear, choice comes from fullness. And a man who has found fullness within himself becomes unshakable. He can walk through the same world as before, but he sees it differently. He's not bitter. He's not closed. He's clear. He still enjoys company. He still laughs. He still loves. But he does it without losing himself. That's the kind of balance most men never experience, because they're too afraid of the silence that builds it. You see, solitude isn't about shutting the world out. It's about letting yourself in. It's about realizing that the man you were trying to become has been waiting inside you all along. Every quiet morning, every lonely evening, every moment of self-doubt, all of it was preparation, not punishment. Because solitude isn't loneliness. Loneliness says something is missing. Solitude says nothing is missing. You finally have everything you need. He didn't become selfish. He became whole. He didn't lose love. He learned to love himself in a way that didn't depend on being chosen. When a man reaches that point, the world changes around him. He walks differently. He speaks differently. He moves through life with quiet authority. He doesn't need to convince anyone of his worth. He lives it. And that energy draws respect. Not because he demands it, because he embodies it. He understands now that the greatest success isn't what you can show. It's what you can hold in silence. Peace, focus, freedom. The men without women aren't rejecting love. They're rejecting distraction. They've stopped letting noise dictate their value. They've stopped begging for acceptance. They've stopped chasing validation. They are not lost. They are found. Found in stillness. Found in strength. Found in the quiet moments where the world finally makes sense. He's not lonely. He's finally free. Free from needing to explain himself. Free from the fear of missing out. Free from the idea that his happiness must come from someone else's approval. That's what thriving looks like. It's not flashy. It's not loud. It's not meant to impress. It's meant to last. Because the men who thrive aren't the ones who have more. They're the ones who need less. They don't measure their worth by who stays. They measure it by how peaceful they are when no one does. He still believes in love, but he believes in peace more. And if love ever returns, it will find him already full, already whole, not waiting to be saved, but ready to share the calm he's built. That's the kind of love that lasts. Not dependency, but partnership. Not drama, but depth. Not noise, but understanding. Until then, he'll keep walking his quiet road. He'll keep waking up early, brewing his coffee, and greeting the silence like an old friend. Because that silence no longer feels empty. It feels earned, and maybe that's the real measure of a man. Not how many people need him, but how well he can stand when no one does. He's not incomplete. He's not broken. He's not missing anything. He's just finally at peace with himself. And that peace, once you find it, becomes the foundation for everything else. You stop chasing the world because you realize you already have it within you. So if you're a man listening to this, and you're in that season of quiet, don't rush it. Don't fill it with noise. Don't run from it, because that silence is not your enemy. It's your turning point. You're not falling behind. You're simply falling back into yourself. And one day, when you look back, you'll see it clearly. That the time you thought was empty was the moment you were finally becoming whole. He's not lonely. He's free. And